NVIDIA stock has recently reached a new 52-week low, having crashed around 25% in October alone. And then you think, okay, well, November must have seen a really nice rebound, right? Nope, they dropped even more in November, already down another 30%. So at the time of this recording, when you look at the recent high of 292 versus the recent low of 144, that represents a drop of around 50%. So in just a couple months, this is a stock that has lost 50% of its value. That's insane. So naturally, I've been receiving more questions and comments about NVIDIA stock really than any other stock out there. And these are questions like, why is it crashing? Do I think it's a falling knife? Am I planning on picking up any NVIDIA stock? And do I think that it's a good long-term investment? These are all great questions. Let's get started. What's up, everybody? My name is Ale and welcome to my world of stocks. Now, full disclosure, I do not currently own NVIDIA, but I used to own NVIDIA stock, and I sold out sometime last year because it went up a lot and I wanted to cash in some pretty big profits. But ever since I sold out, the stock just kept climbing ever since, and I always just kind of wish that I would have held on to my stock because I missed out on some pretty big gains there. But it has now crashed by around 50% of its value from its recent highs, and it's actually crashed lower than where I sold it at. So it's definitely got my attention again, and it's definitely a stock that I'm watching very closely. Now, what we'll do in this video is we'll look at the reasons why it's crashing. I'll give my opinion on whether I think it's a good long-term investment. And then at the end of the video, I'll let you know if I plan on buying any NVIDIA stock myself. But let's start the video with the reasons why it's crashing. Okay, now first, there's the obvious reason, which is that the market is in horrible conditions right now. There's a lot of fear being pumped into the market. A lot of people speculating about a recession happening next year. There's the whole trade fight between the US and China. There was the whole midterms thing. There's rising debt, rising interest rates. A lot of different, the list just goes on and on. But a lot of reasons for people to pump a lot of fear into the market. And so investors, or so-called investors, are very trigger happy and they're kind of panicking. And so any kind of negative news is going to trigger a sell-off for many stocks, and especially high growth tech stocks, which is what NVIDIA happens to be, because a lot of these stocks tend to have a lot of hype behind them, which drives up their valuation and makes them a little expensive. And so anytime that you have a little bit of an expensive stock, and there's a lot of fear in the market and things like that, those stocks usually get hammered the worst. So if you come out and you have one bad earnings, or you give poor guidance for just the next upcoming quarter, or any kind of negative news in these market conditions, is going to get your stock hammered. And that's exactly what happened to NVIDIA. Now, I actually thought that their third quarter earnings were pretty good. Revenue came in over 20% higher year over year, and their GAAP net income and EPS were both up almost 50%. And if you compare them to a rival like AMD, NVIDIA had revenue grow 20%, while AMD only grew by around 4%. And NVIDIA also saw record revenue in their data center, professional visualization, and automotive segments. And they even raised their dividend by another 7%, and their gross margin is still very strong at over 60%. But the problem was guidance. Once again, we saw short-term guidance cause a good long-term stock to crash. Now, analysts were looking for $3.4 billion in revenue for NVIDIA's fourth quarter, which would have represented a year-over-year increase of around 17%. But instead, NVIDIA guided much lower than that at only around $2.7 billion, which would actually be a decrease of around 7% year-over-year, according to the Motley Fool. And this caused the stock to drop by almost 20% the next day, and then another 12% the following Monday after the weekend. So why did they guide so much lower? Well, their CEO had this to say: "Our near-term results reflect excess channel inventory post the cryptocurrency boom, which will be corrected. Our market position and growth opportunities are stronger than ever." In other words, cryptocurrencies crashed, which means that they lost a ton of their value, which means that they're not as profitable to mine anymore, which led to crypto miners not purchasing NVIDIA's GPUs to mine cryptocurrencies. In fact, Bitcoin used to cost almost 300% more just at the start of the year, and as a result, many miners are selling their old GPUs on places like eBay for much lower prices than retail, which makes it hard for retail stores to get rid of the excess inventory. We even saw crypto mining affect NVIDIA's rival in AMD. In fact, AMD mentioned that blockchain sales for the same quarter last year made up a quote high single-digit percentage of their total revenue. So if we guess as high as 10%, that means that crypto-related sales may have accounted for around $150 million of their total revenue. And given that this year's third quarter blockchain sales were quote negligible, that means that it hasn't really been coming in anymore. So considering that they missed revenue estimates by 50 million and missed guidance by another 100 million, that means that the new absence of around $150 million in blockchain sales may have single-handedly caused AMD to miss analyst expectations, and we all know what happened to the stock that day. It got obliterated, dropping by another 20% just on that earnings day alone. Now the good news is that I do think things will stabilize for both companies after a couple quarters. The whole impact of crypto mining was a short-term boost to their sales, but it should never have been taken as a long-term asset. And when both companies talked about this, they often said very similar things along the lines of, hey, we're currently experiencing better than expected sales because of blockchain related sales, but we're still focused more on our core segments like gaming, artificial intelligence, data center, Internet of Things, autonomous driving, machine learning, deep learning, things like that. Maybe some of those more so for NVIDIA, but you get the point. Now we'll get back to NVIDIA in just a second, but when looking at AMD, their CEO Lisa Su said in their last conference call that it won't be a quick fix and that they're expecting it to take a couple quarters to get back to a normal GPU channel, but that data center GPU sales will help with that and be a meaningful contribution to fourth quarter sales. But back to NVIDIA, the problem is that their distribution partners have too many Pascal-based GPUs. So on the Pascal architecture, those are the GPUs like the 1070, 1080. They're not selling through enough because of the slowdown of crypto mining. So I really think that if we want NVIDIA stock to recover, we probably have to deal with this issue. So how long will that take? Well, according to the CFO of NVIDIA, she had this to say during the conference call. Pascal, so talking about the Pascal architecture that we just mentioned, is well positioned as the GPU of choice in the mid-range for the holidays, and we expect to work down channel inventories over the next quarter or two. And we really saw a similar response from AMD, saying that their data center GPUs will help their sales, and in a couple quarters they should be able to normalize their GPU channel as well. So in my opinion, I think we probably see a weak fourth quarter, maybe another weak quarter after that, but eventually things normalize. And the good news is that a lot of this negativity, a lot of this guidance is being priced into the stock right now, which does leave some upside. Say they actually come out and they have better than expected earnings, right? Expectations are going to be much lower now. That's the reason why the stock came down by 50%. It didn't just happen magically. It's because guidance is being lowered and estimates are coming down. So analysts are going to expect less, which means that if NVIDIA actually comes out and surprises a little bit, there could be some upside there as well. Now, I don't know if it will or won't be. That's speculation. I never try to predict earnings, and I'm horrible at predicting earnings, so I never try to do that. I just try to invest long term. So as a long-term investor, I'm very bullish on NVIDIA. The only problem with me personally is that I have a lot of my budget going towards Disney stock right now, and I also wanted to open a position in Alibaba. But if NVIDIA keeps crashing the way it's crashing and the price keeps coming down, I'm not going to be able to resist. I'm going to have to open a position in NVIDIA because I'm very bullish on them in the long term. And I'll give you just 3 reasons why I'm so bullish on NVIDIA in the long term, and none of them have to do with cryptocurrencies. Reason number 1 is their server GPU segment. We're continuously seeing more companies either switch from using CPUs to GPUs or using a combination of both. In fact, just last year, NVIDIA saw their data center business grow a massive 133% to almost $2 billion in sales because companies are taking notice of the power and artificial intelligence technology that NVIDIA has to offer. And just this past quarter alone, they claim to have seen record data center profits, and when looking at the top 500 list of fastest supercomputers in the world, the percentage of them using NVIDIA GPUs jumped by almost 50% year over year, and almost 300% in the last 5 years, and that includes the 2 fastest computers in the world, the fastest computer in the US, the fastest in Europe, and the fastest in Japan. Now, as far as the different products that NVIDIA offers in the data center market, they have their Volta GPU that is used by AI supercomputers to reduce the learning cycle of AI from days to just hours and boost deep learning performance by almost 1000%. They also introduced Rapids this past quarter, which is an open source GPU acceleration platform for large-scale data analytics and machine learning, and it's already being adopted by HP, Dell, IBM, and Oracle. And analysts are predicting that the market in which Rapids is used, that being the data science and machine learning market, is valued at around $20 billion and is pushing up the high-performance computing market overall to around $36 billion. They also launched the NVIDIA T4 Cloud GPU and NVIDIA TensorRT Hyperscale Inference Platform that delivers advanced acceleration for voice, video, image, social media interaction, and recommendation services in hyperscale data centers, which process billions of those type of queries every single day. And the TensorRT platform, in combination of both software and their T4 GPUs, can process these queries up to 40 times faster than CPUs alone. And speaking of their T4 GPU, it received the fastest adoption of any server GPU in history, and it's already been offered to Google Cloud customers. And here's what Google had to say about the partnership. Quote, "Real-time visualization and online inference workloads need low latency for their end users. We are delighted to partner with NVIDIA to offer T4 GPU support for Google Cloud customers." Now, NVIDIA also launched the Quadro RTX server platform that uses Quadro RTX GPUs and Quadro Infinity software to allow multiple users to access a single GPU through virtual workstations, increasing the density of the data center. And it comes with content creation and render software pre-installed that NVIDIA claims will allow end users to use ray tracing capabilities and photorealistic rendering solutions that can be scaled in the data center at a quarter of the cost of CPU-only render farms. And finally, they even announced their NVIDIA Clara platform for the medical market that uses a combination of the Xavier AI computing module and Turing GPUs to process massive amounts of big data that get generated each second. And before, this used to be done by supercomputers using FPGAs, CPUs, and GPUs, but the Clara platform can simplify it to just a single GPU-based architecture to help doctors and scientists with early detection, diagnosis, and treatment of diseases. Okay, now reason number 2 is their automotive segment, because the autonomous vehicle market is really just in its infancy. So that's going to be a growing market for the future. Now, I don't know how long it'll take, for cars to be driving themselves, or, if we'll ever really see it at a large scale. But I do think that autonomous functionality, different autonomous functionality will be integrated into more and more cars, like what we're seeing with Tesla. I really do think that that will start to be integrated to more and more cars going forward, and I think NVIDIA will play a major role in that. They already have their Drive PX Pegasus supercomputer that's the size of a license plate, and it already offers full automation, which is level 5 autonomous driving. On top of that, at the end of their last fiscal year, they already had over 300 companies using their NVIDIA Drive platform, and that number should be much larger by now, because I was reading a report from September that mentioned that over 450 different companies are already using their platform. On top of that, just this past quarter alone, NVIDIA announced expanded level 2 autopilot partnerships with Toyota, Volvo, and Isuzu. They also announced that 2 of the leading tier 1 suppliers in Continental and Veoneer have both decided to use NVIDIA's Drive platform for self-driving products that'll start to be used in 2020, and they started production of the world's first single-chip autopilot system-on-chip SoC named Xavier, and already started sending out development kits to companies and developers. Now, in case none of that made sense, just know that level 2 is like assisted driving, so it's not full automation. We're probably still a long ways away from that at a large scale, but level 2 assisted driving, I could see a lot of growth in that just here in the near future. And those partnerships I mentioned, like Toyota, Volvo, and Isuzu, those are all based on the level 2 platform on the new Xavier chips. Now, Isuzu is actually planning to continuously improve that platform so that they can use it for their commercial trucks, and they want to eventually make their commercial trucks driverless. They want to reach full automation for their commercial trucks at some point in the future. So overall, I don't really see any other chip company making as much progress in the autonomous vehicle market as NVIDIA. And it's really no surprise when you consider how much money NVIDIA spends on research and development. In fact, if you compare them to their rival in AMD, AMD spent around $364 million in this previous quarter, while NVIDIA spent almost double that at over $600 million on research and development. Now, obviously, those budgets are being spent on different products and in different markets, but I think that when you consider all the technology and all the partnerships that NVIDIA has in the autonomous vehicle market, it's going to be very hard for any other company to dethrone them. Okay, and finally, we have reason number 3, and that's gaming. Now, according to Newzoo.com, the gaming market is growing by billions of dollars every single year, and NVIDIA plays a major role in that because they do power the Nintendo Switch console, and more importantly, NVIDIA is usually the top choice in GPUs for PC gamers. However, there are some major concerns here. For starters, there's a whole collapse of cryptocurrencies and the slowdown of crypto mining, and so that's flooded the market with all of these used GPUs that you can get at much cheaper prices, which is leading to excess supplier inventories. But on top of that, there isn't really a whole lot of reason for gamers to upgrade their GPUs, at least not yet. When you consider that the Pascal-based GPUs like the 1070 Ti, 1080 Ti, those are still performing pretty well for PC gaming. Now, NVIDIA did just release their new lineup of GPUs based on the new Turing architecture, like the RTX 2080, 2080 Ti, and 2070, all of which offering next-gen shaders and real-time ray tracing. And if you haven't heard of ray tracing, that's a technology that can make CGI and video games look almost like real life in certain cases, but it just looks really nice overall. But the problem is that this technology isn't really being utilized yet. And even when it is, you usually take a dip in performance, like frame rates get hurt, things like that. So it's not always the best scenario to actually use the technology. Now, as far as games go, there's only really 2 that I know of. I know of the newest Tomb Raider, and I think Battlefield 5 are using some form of ray tracing. But the problem is that game developers aren't really using the ray tracing technology yet, because when you look at the market, home consoles like the Xbox and the PlayStation and of course the Nintendo Switch, they're way underpowered to get anywhere close to ray tracing. So there isn't a whole lot of incentive for game developers to develop for ray tracing technology outside of PC gaming. Now, it is possible that AMD at some point develops their GPUs for the home consoles with some sort of ray tracing technology, but that's probably going to be very expensive. And even if Microsoft and Sony switch to NVIDIA, their GPUs are very expensive. So I just don't see how they can keep home console costs down if they're using these new ray tracing GPUs. And so it could just be a long time until we see these GPUs with ray tracing technologies come down in price to the point where we can see it adopted more widely in the gaming market. Now, that isn't to say that the new 2000 series cards aren't better than the 1000 series cards, because they certainly are. They do have better performance, but a lot of people are arguing that the performance isn't that much better, especially if you're not using ray tracing. The improvements aren't that much better to warrant the higher cost of having to upgrade your GPUs to the new ones. However, there was recently an article from eTechnics.com that said that NVIDIA pulled down their 2080 Ti cards because of certain bugs, but then they updated that article and said that the cards were just sold out. So apparently the new cards are actually selling pretty well. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I actually purchased a 2070 myself. I know that's blasphemy because I'm invested in AMD, but I bought a 2070 card because it was a free upgrade actually. So I was going through a manufacturer and they just gave a free upgrade. It was originally going to be a 1080 and they gave me a 2070 for free. So that's why I upgraded. But anyway, it looks like they're selling decently. We kind of don't have any real numbers yet. Hopefully we'll get some more numbers maybe in the next quarter. But the thing is also that I do think that ray tracing is the future. It might be a little while until we get there, but ray tracing is probably going to be the future of gaming. And so the fact that NVIDIA is investing in it right now, hopefully that will lead to them having the lead over all their other competition and knowing how to use the technology much better and just kind of keep that competitive edge over rivals like AMD, being able to say that they have better performance because they've been using this technology longer and investing in it with like research and development and things like that. Okay, now before we wrap up the video, I do just want to quickly comment on their valuation and their balance sheet. Now, according to Yahoo Finance, AMD has a trailing PE of 61 and a forward PE of 30, while NVIDIA is much lower at 19 for both. But of course, Intel actually remains the cheapest option when looking at just the PE ratios at 15 trailing and 10 forward. But NVIDIA isn't really that far behind, and I would argue that NVIDIA is a much more exciting company. They're tackling these much more exciting markets, and for the price, I think that you are getting a pretty good value in NVIDIA. Now, as far as the balance sheet goes, it looks good for a growing tech stock, but I do think that it could be just a little bit better. Their asset to liability ratio is like a 3-to-1, which is good, but their cash looks pretty low at less than $1 billion, with accounts payable almost double than that at around $1.6 billion. But short-term investments and receivables does help strengthen their current assets to over $11 billion versus current liabilities at only $1.6 billion. So for a tech stock that has a lot of growth ahead of it and that invests a lot of money in research and development, I think that its balance sheet looks pretty good. So in conclusion, I think there's a few things to consider here. Yes, the cryptocurrency collapse is going to affect them in the short term, but they have, NVIDIA is very well diversified and they have many other segments to rely on. In fact, looking at their different segments for the past 3 quarters combined year over year, you can see that revenue from gaming was up 40%, data center was up 70%, pro visualization was up 23%, which by the way, the visual effects industry is estimated to be worth around $250 billion. And then the automotive segment was also up another 12%. Not to mention that NVIDIA does also pay a dividend. The yield is really low at almost 0.5% with only 5 years of consecutive growth, but at least the payout ratio is also extremely low at less than 10%. So I doubt that this dividend will be disappearing anytime soon. So all in all, with the conditions of the market and with possibly another weak quarter in NVIDIA, I think that we could see some more downside to the stock. But long term, which is the type of investor that I am, I don't really, I don't try to predict short-term movements. As a long-term investor, I think NVIDIA looks great to me. 5 years from now, 10 years from now plus, I think that this stock is a really good investment in my opinion. I'm not going to be buying it just quite yet, but if it does drop some more, I don't think I'll be able to resist anymore, and I think I'll have to start buying it. But right now my money is kind of going towards Disney and some other stocks. But yeah, NVIDIA definitely on my radar and definitely a stock that I want to start picking up. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think NVIDIA is a good long-term investment? How do you feel about the market in general? You think everything is just going down the toilet and you don't want to invest in anything? I don't know. Whatever your opinions are, I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to talk to you guys about them. So make sure you leave a comment. If you like this video, make sure you support the channel. Hitting the like button is all I ask you guys to do. It really helps a lot, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful, beautiful day and that you take care. Bye-bye.